Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is the Chronicles of Apple from the Apple of My Eye, and I'm going to go over this particular topic in regards to what they consider globe versus flat earth. Okay, and I just want to kind of give briefing about this. I'm pretty much your typical 40-some years old person that has basically lived in this world where we are pretty much very accepting. I was raised to be very accepting of the globe. Okay, I grew up with all the encyclopedia. One of my beach ball is actually a globe. We played with a globe, and I was always looking at the globe, and I love the globe. I would have a background with a globe behind me, and I would put down exactly places like, I just wanted to see all the places that I've been to. So I've taken a lot of trips by plane, and so I'm very well aware of what I see when I look out the window. And so there's a lot of people. So I'm kind of trying to relate to people as somebody that, has a typical life um, of a person that has seen a bit of the world, and we're pretty much in that cluster of people where believing in the globe is the natural thing. So I looked into this flat earth issue over the fact that I have some children that I was working with who have autism, and they were talking about the flat earth, and I was very curious, what is this kind of insanity that is happening to these young kids, and therefore I wanted to examine it myself. So I went onto YouTube and I looked at some of the things that they're talking about, and lo and behold, it was mind-boggling. So I'm going to continue and show you pictures, and I called it, I planned it, okay? The great I am, okay? Planned this earth, and it is returning to where it was meant to be described. So I do believe that in the future, more people would come to a realization. And I am just responding to the many people that had actually exposed this particular topic. It is important that we test every spirit as a human being and be very cognizant with how the world is folding into and where we stand in history. So we pretty much think this way. It is perfectly fine. I can stand over here. I can stand over there, and my foot could be right across somebody. And the one thing that is between us is the core of the earth, okay? And some water. Now, we don't really try to question why this water here is not flowing down to the water below. We don't really want to ask questions how is it possible that plane will be diving down, okay? So to a child, if you were to present them with this, it really will take a mental gymnastics, okay? So I'm just thinking about my students who are autistic, and I'm trying to understand why this flat earth became such a big deal. So one of the model that was basically presented is a dome-shaped earth, okay, where you have water here, and this is more of the biblical. So I just wanted to show you this because rakia, or firmament, the word rock probably came from the word rakia. The biblical perspective, and I'm going to try to go over similar of the verses from the Bible later on. You will see that water above the firmament is in existence, and then there's water down here, and it's separated by a vault. Okay, now the biblical description of hell tends to be south, which is at the bottom, and we're going to kind of return to this particular version of the earth. So let's take a look at the moon landing and some of the few things that are very questionable. So right about on this side, I don't know if you can see my little spotlight here. I don't know if you can see that. This here is basically what you call the spider. It's basically a spider looking thing that is meant to be light. Exactly how, so you got the rocket ship. So let's get this for lack of better use. You've got the rocket ship going about up onto the exosphere. Okay, we now have beyond an exosphere, magnetosphere. Okay, but remember the atmosphere. Once you keep going past and you hit the last atmosphere, whether it's exosphere or whatever else they come up with, when you hit past that, there is a change in the air. It's going to be vacuum, supposedly a vacuum. And then when you go further than that, uh, somehow we can get to the moon. And in order to do the trajectory, you got to get the right tangential force and somehow join the orbit of the moon. So if this is the Earth over here, okay, around that door, okay, and this is the moon, and this is a rocket that got out of the Earth, it's supposed to go in there and then somehow land here, okay? You got to have the right tangent to make it through that at that one specific point, and then go around and dock. And in the midst of that vacuum environment, this thing here will disassemble, okay? So it will separate into three, or however many it needs to. Now, exactly where the rest of the stuff goes, if it just hovers over into to the surface above the moon, we never got a picture of the. I mean, we saw the shuttle, the capsule that came down, but that's that spider thing. Okay, so that spider thing on the video. Okay, they show the video of them coming down, the spider, or whatever the shuttle, and this thing in a vacuum was able to fall off this thing here, fall off the rocket, and make its do and launches down onto the moon like a parasite, a spider. So if you can believe that, it made its way and it landed nicely, and they were able to put the flag that obviously is waving. And there were two versions of the moon landing. One was a stable, slightly stable, it was almost like a stiff flag, and the other one was definitely fluffing around. uh, then if you look, okay, one of the things that they mentioned, this is why people that are into films have noticed that this is heavily faked, is that there's only one source of light. They did this when the moon is not, of course, this is not the surface of the moon that is facing the sun, otherwise it would all be dead. They would just fry, okay? Now, the chance of things not freezing, or there is apparently weather in the moon where they can have storm, if you could believe that. And you can see that there's a lot of tracks here, right? Now, if they just got down, this is quite a bit of tracks happening. Like, I mean, is he dancing around it? There's quite a bit of disturbance going on the ground here. I don't know if you can see my spotlight. This flag is showing shadow going towards the left, okay? And the man, I don't know if it's Neil Armstrong, his shadow is going this way. So now you've got two lightings. The one way that happens is having two lightings. So this is one of the problem with this particular picture that I wanted to point out. But the most confusing thing for me is how you have a camera that just doesn't run into problems, and you've got this equipment here that doesn't, that managed to even land, how you launch it off. And there's another man, there's two of them that stepped on the moon, and then there's another man that just sits in the rocket ship. Now this is supposed to come back into the capsule. How did you do that? And when I watched how that's supposed to go up, you don't see enough firing. I don't even know how you can fire that up. It is not created to be fired up. So that could look like it just burn. And you can't, this does not it's not a helicopter wing because it is vacuum. It is, you can twirl and twirl and twirl. It's not going to do that. It's not going to lift up. Okay, it doesn't have the kind of atmospheric pressure and wind and stuff that we do here on Earth. Okay, based on their claim of what the surface of the moon would be like. Try to, okay, this thing here can separate, okay, and there it is vacuum, so there's not going to be air resistance. The moment you do not have air resistance, you can't move. And the chance of something that looks like this, okay, landing specifically with its feet down, to me is quite questionable, because in a vacuum, being able to assemble and disassemble is bad enough if you don't have a docking place, leave alone doing that after a rocket ship going 2400,000 miles per hour is gonna what, slowly separate. So that to me is not likely to happen. But that's just my personal observation, and judging from like how vacuum kind of works. So the chance of them making that particular tangent to go into the orbit of the moon and then getting into the other side and being able to escape that and quote unquote being able to lift up, I don't know how they lifted off. Okay, there is not much propelling there. You didn't see that much fire going at the bottom to actually lift off. And this thing here, in regards to the NASA, there's a lot of suspicious things, and it's quite interesting that they said that the NASA, it looks like a serpent tongue crossing through the earth, and there's the stars, right? Now, interestingly, you can see that this is the supposed earth, or I guess it's meant to say it's a universe, but it has the shape of a planet, and you can see the constellation just sitting on the actual earth. Okay, then you have the serpent tongue here, and this is the NASA symbolism. It's sort of telling you what it's about. With this particular picture, I wanted to show you, this is kind of like how they depict, okay, the distances away from the sun being this gigantic thing. It's 109 times, they say, like bigger than the planet Earth, and even more gigantic. I mean, we can't even see the moon in this perspective, right? So the moon is somehow like an ant. Like if you can picture like a big a watermelon or an apple, and you've got the little ant sitting there. You the concept that they tell us, and they try to make this very scientific and mathematical, is that it was just like a perfect spot where this moon can somehow eclipse the sun. Now take a look at how the sun is. We are running 66,600 miles per hour at a particular distance on this gigantic moon, and moon is the only one that eclipsed the sun. Total eclipse of the sun. Okay, total eclipse of the sun. Okay, so you can, it's like saying that there is a dinosaur sitting there somewhere far away in the view of an apple, and there comes this little ant, and all of a sudden we blocked off an entire dinosaur across across the view of the earth. Okay, that is kind of next to impossible. Okay, if they are not even close in size, and the distance itself would just perfectly do that kind of stuff, how come Venus, I mean, doesn't Venus ever, we see Venus, but somehow Venus is just out there, I guess, and oh, that little star looking thing, that's just Venus. But Venus does not do anything to eclipse the sun. um, and Venus has its own light. Is that what it is? I don't get it. But they would say, well, that's Venus. But I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this to me is kind of like ridiculous. So you're imagining basically a stationary, like a sleeping dinosaur. Okay. A sleeping dinosaur with its butt, I guess, facing the apple. And the apple is sitting there with a little ant, and the apple is actually be flinging around. Okay, it is supposed to be going around 66,600 miles per hour in the orbit of a sleeping dino. Okay, with its butt up. Okay, and you could see that from the view of the apple. Okay, but somehow it got completely eclipsed, completely gone. That's it, just like that, because of an ant. Okay, that's what it looks like to me. So I said that this is kind of like a heliocentric is also very, very questionable to me, because it sounds like hell. And there's a bit of a joke going on here with the 666 happening. It's just like Broadway, on Broadway. So you got to think about how the devil is very crafty. And we have words like extraterrestrial. Okay, extra means extra, terrestrial means land, extra land out there. Okay, space, we have like the space is supposed to be nothing, it's void, right? And we're supposed to get something out of this. Okay, you almost can look at astronomers that are going to actually be getting into the rocket ship as somebody that might be just like a very sophisticated suicidal person to want to do this, knowing what you know, you are going to take this feat that could totally kill you um, in just a few hours, or less than a few hours. It's really quick, because so many things can just go wrong with this, because you are not working, you don't have a docking place, you don't have extra um, you know extra spaceship out there that can actually protect you for anything. Your communication is bleak. It just, this is kind of very, very suspicious to me, to want to do this. But again, we're dealing with, very high powered men that are probably paid well to lie and join the lie. When there's a lot of money, people will do anything. Now, here is what I would consider the I planet. Um, this is the Arctic, which is considered the north, okay? And then the east and west, okay? So that's east, that would be Australia. Far east would be there. This is Africa, America, South America. This entire thing is the Arctic Circle, and I'm going to go over why they think this is. I want to go over a little bit about the Bible version of the sun versus what is being told in terms of science. According to science, the sun is a large ball of fire, and it is steady. The Earth revolves around the sun 66,600 miles per minute. The Earth is about 24,000 miles, circumference. I mean the center of it. But the Bible depicts the sun as circling around the Earth, and there is a volt, which I kind of showed earlier. So here I wanted to show you the sunset. Okay, this is what we observe. Now, what I find very interesting is that if the sun is just so hot and it is so far away and it is so big, okay, why is it that it comes off like a flashlight like this? It's like a light bulb. It's got that very clear edges. It's not blurring. Uh, it's very defined. I think if it was a lot bigger, there would be sort of like just this glare that is just too hard for us to even, you know, when it comes, when we get there, it would just be a glaring light. Like if you're, you know how it is when you are crossing the street and at night and you have this headlight where you can't really quite see the, it's not defined. I think it should be more like that if it was that strong. So, of course, if you have like a dome and let's say if it's a dome and you have something underneath it, within the dome, you've got something that is um, not, doesn't have to be entirely huge, okay? However far that dome may be, if you have the sun circling around the earth, this appears more credible to me. This actually makes more sense. And that's what drives me crazy looking at the flat earth. I'm like, I can see this. I can sense that. It makes sense. Okay, and I'm looking at the autistic kids and I'm like, what is the crazy fascination about this flat earth? I'm like, this is so obsolete, okay? Because I was educated fully accepting the globe and just not bothering over I'm just saying, okay, it is so big. The earth is so big, okay? But I had no idea that the nautical mile is pretty evident in 1 mile, okay? So that is quite credible. There is a sloping, okay? There should have been a sloping, but it's not observable. Uh, there should be engineers using nautical mile, not regular miles, okay? When we see the sun, if it was really that far away, very strong, I would say it shouldn't have that clearly defined line like this, okay? But, and if it's, if we're looking at it from that perspective, I think it should not come off this beautiful the way we see it, okay? This is a lot easier for me to get that if that beam, I actually had, kind of like I had like this glass one time and I kind of did that where you take a flashlight and you go around it and it does spotlight like half of the dome. And it was the weirdest little experiment and I did it on YouTube. And of course, those are all just thrown away. So I think we need to do further experimentation using kind of like a glass dome versus just, doing this kind of assumption based on different people. And most of us should be able to replicate that stuff. Okay, but is it really gonna show the same numbers? That is the one thing that we need to kind of further look into. So wouldn't it be more like this, where the sun is beaming at us because we are just at the, like we are crossing, into the, into the sun. It would feel more like this. is what I'm feeling, okay? And even worse, it would be even bigger because this is kind of a small spotlight. The sun is not like this. It's not going to do that. It will be this whole thing is bright. So it would literally eat up quite a bit of the earth, okay, on that side to be very, very bright. But the sun should not be like a nice little quarter. So this is kind of like what I'm talking about. This is the sun and the earth is like that. So even if you put that there, we're not going to see it so tiny. 66,000 miles per hour. And we have planets that can actually, I mean, the moon can block us, but not the other planets that are bigger. So anyhow, now I want you to take a look at this particular distance of Earth to the Sun and some quote-unquote calculation. They called it the 1 AU. 93 million miles. Okay, they just don't want to say. Okay, we're about 1,000 miles per hour doing this thing, and somehow 66,600 going that way. Now we've got the distance, about 100 million miles. Okay, 100 million miles, like how much of a definition should be able to see about the sun? Okay, so it doesn't add up. 150 million kilometers. Earth travels around the sun in an orbit that is slightly oval shaped. So, okay, known as the eclipse. Therefore, the planet's distance from the sun changes throughout the year. Okay, that is a bit of a cop-out, so, in case they screwed it up, like, however, the average distance from the Earth to the sun is about 93 million miles. Okay, 93 million miles. So the first person to measure the distance to the sun was a Greek astronomer, Aristarchus of Samos, who lived from about 310 BC to 230 BC. He used the phases of the moon to measure the sizes and distance of the sun and the moon. So the only thing there is that you don't really have a measuring stick, right? He postulated that when the half moon appears in the Earth's sky, the center of our planet and the center of the moon create a line in space that forms a 90-degree angle with another line that could be drawn through the space from the moon's center all the way to the sun's center using trigonometry. Aristarchus could determine the hypotenuse, a triangle base of those two imaginary lines. Okay, so you're dealing with imaginary lines. Can 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 somebody please do like a small module of this and actually have it tested with a measuring stick and see like if this is going to be the right value, because you're dealing with imaginary lines, and 1 AU, this is not measured for anything else, there is not a real way to really test this, okay? How many engineers today can actually come up with the same thing? Okay, if somebody from 310 BC only had to use angles and stuff, how many of the children today, let's talk about college, had actually done this over and over and say, oh yeah, that's correct, and it's correct in the micro whatever, let's measure the distance from here to there. Okay, so do we have how many really confident engineers do we have to scale a building standing where they're at without any equipment and just using uh, their measuring stick, or you can get the degrees, okay? If there's a way for you to get the degrees, go ahead. And have everybody doing this thing, and we can see it in a smaller scale, so it's got to be true for a farther scale. I feel like there's something missing, because how come we're not being taught this? If this is such a, somebody from 310 BC was able to calculate it, why couldn't we should be able to calculate this over and over, okay? and then we can keep testing that theory. And this is part of your mathematical, scientific, physics experiment. So I question that. Although imprecise, Aristarchus provided a sample. I need to read it from the. So anyway, I think this needs to be checked. And I want as many engineers to actually say they have tried this and tested it and it's true. Okay? Like with 100% confidence. Okay? Because Aristarchus cannot be the only person that can do this. If you're talking about a mathematical equation, now what I've read in some is that it's a cosine of something, okay? But I think you kind of have to have two, you know? You got to have two of the digits in the equation. I mean, do we know the ceiling? Do we know the ceiling? Okay? Do we know, have we tried checking if there is a dome? Okay? Yeah, I guess I haven't found that, right? Or have they? So there's things here that I think in today's society we should be able to check and recheck and actually do a mass education on this particular topic. Now, another thing, so if we look at in history, there's this guy named Ptolemy, 85 to 165 AD, strongly influenced the educational system in the Greek. He's a Greek astronomer. Ptolemy revised a geocentric model to explain all the planetary motion. His model had planets move in the circles that also moved in bigger circles. This belief persisted for about 1,500 years. I believe this is a very strong proponent during the 1500s that there is this kind of like planet going around the earth, okay, everything, and the sun is in line. You see that the earth, moon, Venus, sun, and Mars, and they have this sort of like concept, okay, and that's based on the observation that they have. I don't think at this point they are coming up with distances and stuff like that, but the geocentric model, you could see where they present these things as constellations, okay, that what we see in the sky, okay. You can see that the earth is at the center because we are observing this in our environment, okay. Now at some point in time, Aristarchus of Samos, who lived in about 310 BC to 230 BC, he used the phases of the moon to measure the size and distances. This is ridiculous. 310 BC. The distance from the Earth to the Sun is 93 million miles. Assume it takes 365 days for the Earth to travel once around the Sun. The Earth travels in a circle with the Sun at the center. Work out the average speed of the Earth in miles per hour. And at this point, they assume that we are traveling around the Sun, not the Sun traveling around the Earth. If you think about a sundial, you remember how we used to have a phone and you dial? You dial. There's a sundial. I'm going to talk about that later, but I thought it was just interesting. The sun is the one doing the dialing. It does all this turning, like the old type of phone that we used to have. It's like a dial, okay? And that is the same system when you're talking about how the description of the sun and the moon in the biblical description. So this is all made out of assumption, okay? Because obviously there was a twist that took place at some point where we went from geocentric to heliocentric. Heliocentric. Okay, so the geocentric is more biblical than the heliocentric. And during the geocentric, they already are observing that the sun, the moon, they are revolving around the sky and the other planets. So the first known person to measure the distance to the sun was a Greek astronomer, Aristarchus of Samos, who lived from about 310 BC to 230 BC. He used the phases of the moon to measure the sizes and distances of the sun and the moon. He postulated that when the half moon appears in the Earth's sky, the center of our planet and the center of the moon creates a line in space that forms a 90-degree angle with another line that could be drawn through space from the moon's center all the way to the sun's center. Could be drawn. How did they do that? I'd like to know if anybody can recreate this particular thing. Using trigonometry, Aristarchus could determine the hypotenuse of the triangle based on those two imaginary lines. So we've got imaginary lines. We're basing it off of imaginary lines, okay? Keyword, imaginary lines. The value of the hypotenuse would provide a distance between the sun and the earth. But basing it off of what? Okay? Imaginary lines. Although imprecise, Aristarchus provided a simple understanding of the sizes and distance of the three bodies, which led him to conclude that the Earth goes around the Sun about 1,700 years before Nicolaus Copernicus proposed his heliocentric model of the solar system. So they knew that there was 365 days because of the way the sun is moving. They're clocking that, and they had the sundial at some point. I don't know exactly when the sundial came out, but the calculation here, okay, 365 times 24 and divided by halves. This first calculate 93,000 all of a sudden appears. Don't know. But anyhow, I'd like to have engineers actually recreate this particular assumption, okay? And let's see if they can come up with, let's have 100 mathematicians, okay, do the same exact calculation as Aristarchus, okay? And interesting, and I'm gonna go over the other ones as well. So I wanted to discuss this guy named Nicholas, Nickel and Dimus, Nicholas, Nicholas Copernicus, Nicholas Copernicus, okay? He nicks us, he cups us. Okay, he's a mathematician and the Renaissance polymath, active as a mathematician, astronomer, and a Catholic canon, who formulated a model of the universe that placed the sun rather than the earth at its center. Take a look at the time frame, 1473. There are a lot of Masonic people around that time. Masons started out with the Knights Templar. Knights Templar became illegal. They went underground, so on and so forth. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. So many of the scientists are actually Masonic people, and that is proven. And that is the kind of clout that they join in. And people are called in that particular fraternity for the purpose of actually global confiscation. They act very similarly to the apostles. So the apostles had spread the gospel, and in time come out this kind of a spreading of the demonic teachings. So Nicholas Copernicus is a Polish Mikola Copernicus. It's Mikol. Nicholas, there's also a German version to this, born. So why do you have two kinds? I don't understand that, okay? Either he's Polish or German. Why can't we just keep it as one? Born February 19 of 1473 in Tehran, Royal Prussia, Poland, died May 24, 1543. This is the height of the beginning, like a strong coalition of the Masonic movement. East Prussia. So how is he in a Catholic canon? What the heck is a Catholic canon? Is he a monk? He's not a, he cannot be a canon. Okay, so I don't get that part. So he is somehow very influential. I don't know if he's royalty. Polish astronomer who proposed that the planets have the sun as the fixed point to which their motions are to be referred. The Earth is a planet which, besides orbiting the sun annually, also turns once daily on its own axis, and very slow long-term changes in the direction of this axis accounts for the precession of the equinoxes. This representation of the heaven is usually called heliocentric. So again, there's the hel word in there, sun-centered system derived from the Greek helios. Copernicus' theory, it makes me think of a copper coin, became the later thinkers of the scientific revolution, including such major figures as Galileo, Kepler, Descartes, and Newton. Copernicus probably hit upon his main ideas sometime between 1508 and 1514, and during those years he wrote a manuscript usually called Commentarios, little commentaries. However, this book, the book that contained the final version of the theory, De Revolutionibus Orbius Coelestium Livre V, 6 books concerning the revolutions of the heavenly orbs. Okay, so 6 books, okay? You can make what you want out of it, okay? But there's a lot of this 6, okay, going on. So think about the time frame here. That's 1500s. You can look up stuff on the Masonic movement, and that is a big time for this. So Copernicus is the one that made the statement by 1500s that we are revolving around the sun. It's the heliocentric, but actually, how did they come up with this idea? There is a guy named Aristarchus of Samos. There's a lot of Aristarchus. Okay, so anyhow, apparently, because I'm trying to figure out how the heck did they come up with the distance and the size of the sun and all that stuff. Well, they based it on this guy named Aristarchus. Okay, Aristarchus. So anyhow, it's interesting. His name has the word star in it. Okay, it is Samos. I don't know what Samos mean. Air, stars, skies. Air, stars, skies. I sure hope. It sounds like a stage name, right? That is just so hard to say. It's talking about how did they measure this? So they said that, okay, so they're looking at the geometry, and I was good in geometry at one point. But of course, this is not for me to really explain. And I think we need to summon a lot of scientists to actually recreate this particular experimentation with a critical mind and take a look at this, okay? So the concept there was supposedly there was some kind of Aristarchus used a triangle similarities to measure the distance. The idea came upon him during a solar eclipse. He understood that the shadow then has a cone shape, while the moon and the sun have circular discs. So he could do the same with the moon and another object by scaling it about its eyes until not blocking the whole moon. He created his own cone. Now you're gonna time this somehow. He is gonna time this right when there's gonna be an eclipse, and he is gonna get a coin, do some measurement from the coin, make a cone from the coin, and flop it directly into the sun. And this is how he discovered the distance. Okay. After a while, the object suited, but of what kind it was, something with a circular disc, like a coin, and indeed, some coin is what he used. We're getting nickel and dime, but this is a coin. Okay. He took one and found the position by moving it up and down. Now, he already knew all. Of course, their angular sizes were equal because the coin covered the moon. It means that their observer's triangle had the same angles, thus they were similar. Similar triangles bear the proportion properly. If corresponding angles are congruent, then also their sides are in proportion to each other. Aristarchus estimated the ratio of the coin's distance to its diameter as 108. So somehow he came up with 108. And by that 108 is how you ended up with the distance, the size, all these crazy things, okay? You have to take a look at this, okay? You have got to take a look at this. This is the 230 BC. Ancient Greek astronomer, a mathematician who presented the first known heliocentric model that placed the sun at the center of the known universe, with the earth revolving around the sun once a year and rotating about its axis once a day. He was a student of Strato of Lampsacus. I hope this is not just some freaking joke. Strato Lampsacus. Okay? Peripatetical school in Greece. Peripatetical. It's a pathetic school in Greece, according to Ptolemy. During this time there, he observed the summer solstice. Okay, these people are probably, pagans anyway, along with his contribution to the heliocentric model as reported by Vitruvius. He created two separate sundials, one that is flat disk and one that is hemispherical. He was influenced by the concept presented by Philolaus of Croton of a fire at the center of the universe, but Aristarchus identified a central fire with the sun, and he put the other planets in their correct order of distance around the sun. Oh, how amazing is that? Think about this. He knew how to put them in order. Okay. Like Anaxagoras before him, Aristarchus suspected the stars were just other bodies like the sun, albeit farther away from the earth. Often his astronomical ideas were rejected in favor of geocentric theories of Aristotle and Ptolemy. Nicholas Copernicus knew about the possibility that Aristarchus has a moving earth theory, although it is unlikely that Copernicus was aware that it was a heliocentric theory. So, how much of this can you actually buy? And how many people have actually tried getting this diameter based on a coin looking at the eclipse of the sun? Okay, so please take a look at it. Now, here is hypothetically, how like biblical depiction would be. It's like a land mass. It's solid. When the flood happened, all these islands, this entire mass is practically pulled apart in pieces. And flood took place even in the highest places of the entire world. So if you could just imagine this getting flooded over, and this is the dome over here, the earth back before the flood would have a very high concentration of oxygen, which is why they lived longer. Dinosaurs can live until the air thinned out. So the air thinned out after the Noah's Ark, and only 8 people survived. So this is more of like an idea of how it's being described from the Bible in Genesis 1. So continuing on, the way the Bible talks about the firmament and the heavens, open firmament of the heaven, um, there is a definite sort of atmosphere before the actual volt happens, okay? But this is kind of a depiction where you have the sun there, because it's not depicted as being bigger than us, bigger than the earth, and it gives a spotlight on certain areas of the land, which to me is much more realistic, because the you know the 3 hour difference east and west coast of the United States has a purpose. It's really, really early on some parts, and the east is already a lot brighter. Okay, so it seemed to be more of like a spotlight going through, and we can see it go down, because if your head, if you're standing there, and here it is, okay, the spotlight is coming. Once you keep going, okay, once this is like here and it keeps going, then you will see it go down, okay? And obviously it goes down on the east, and then, it brightens up. I mean, it goes to the, it goes eastward, okay? And then it will disappear. So the rising is east, and then it comes down west. And apparently Asia, it actually has a meaning. It has something to do with the word agency, agent, Aegean, agency. So Turkey in particular is part of Asia, and wherever the Bible talked about Asia Minor, it's talking about Turkey. Okay, the Asia Major is China. The Far East are the Indonesian, the Philippines. Those are Far East Asia. And then anything after Turkey would be European nations, and that's about, on one of the map, it is about 30 degree. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, this is what I was talking about. Anywhere, so around here, that's already European nations. And the first thing you'll see there is Turkey, that's Asia Minor. The China is Asia Major, and this is West. This here. Okay, so this tends to be brighter. And let's now, one of the issue that people have concerns is the flight. The flights don't necessarily keep going down. Like, we don't have airplanes that wanted to dip its head down to try to go to the other side, because it should be going lower. Okay, and you have to understand that, and I'm going to go over that later on, the nautical mile is slightly longer than a mile. So if you're going hundreds of miles, such as a plane going by, it would just make sense for it to be dipping its nose down. And this is not the case, okay? The plane goes very level to the water. And if you can take a level, it will stay level. It doesn't go down. But they used to think that 10 kilometers, by 10 kilometers, the ship disappears because the earth has dropped. By the time we had, more telescoping cameras, then we can still see that the ship pops back up. So it didn't really disappear in the ocean. It's still there. Okay. So here is the Earth atmosphere, and somewhere in here, that's where the planes go, and our rockets are supposed to go further down here, past the exosphere. past the exosphere into a vacuum and into an orbit of a moon, okay? You know, there were actually some people that deny that there will ever be a moon landing because they believe that the moon is a plasma. And there is a possibility, based on the Bible, that the moon and the sun is in the bowl facing us, but it could also be meaning inside the vault, an encasement. They will be inside of there. And the moon crossing in between either an atmosphere, an atmospheric pressure, uh, would indicate the kind of crescent moon or a full moon, or depending on if it comes up. So there appears to be something that sort of crosses over it. We don't know if it's an atmosphere or it could be like a little planetoid. I'm not sure, but something is crossing over this moon. And there are people that made claim that it is a plasma. But let's assume that it's an actual round thing, okay? Assuming that there is, it will still be inside the vault, okay? So we're not, the astronomers are not getting past the vault, okay? This is the United Nations, and you can see that there is no Antarctica here. It's basically kind of a splayed out version of the map, and this is actually commensurate to a lot of the map that is strategic for war purposes almost, because this would make sense when it comes down to flight landings of where they go. So if when it comes down to flight paths, they go this way, they go in a straight line. So they don't necessarily have to follow that route, okay? This is waterways, open air, they go this way, and that's what we see with the flight. From here to there, if this is, they do not cross the Antarctic region, and I'm going to go over that. But this is the United Nations logo, so there it gives a familiarity and a connection to the actual flat Earth or a dome Earth. Take a look over here. So Ross and Clark, okay? You will see here that in 1841, James Ross discovered the Ross Sea, Victoria Land, and the volcanoes Mount Erebus and Mount Terror, which were named for the expedition's vessels. They sailed for 250 nautical miles or 460 kilometers along the edge of the low flat-top ice shelf they called variously the Barrier or the Great Ice Barrier, later named the Ross Ice Shelf. And it's a shelf because it is containing the world's water, this, the Atlantic and the Pacific and everything else is just holding the water. And it's an ice, and there's kind of like glaciers, and it will have a plateau. That's what they're seeing. He correctly observed that it was the source of the tabular iceberg seen in the Southern Ocean. In the following year, he attempted to penetrate south of about 55 inches W and explore the eastern side of what is now known as James Ross Island, discovering and naming Snow Hill Island and Seymour Island. So they did try to penetrate through the ice. The Flora Antarctica. Ross reported that Admiralty Sound appeared to Ross to have been blocked by glaciers at its southern end. Admiralty Sound, reported on Admiralty Sound. The expedition was not able to reach the South Magnetic Pole, but inferred its position. The expedition made the first definitive chart of magnetic declination, magnetic clip, and magnetic intensity, in place of the less good charts made by the earlier expedition of Charles Wilkes and Dermond d'Urville. Furthermore, they made substantial observations of the zoology and botany of the region, resulting in a monograph of the zoology and a series of 4 detailed monographs by Hooker on the botany, collectively called Flora Antarctica, published in parts between 1843 and 1859. The expedition was the last major voyage of exploration made wholly under sail. Okay, after that, I guess, nobody wanted to go through this place anymore until the military came. So this is very hard for me to read, but it's talking about a particular distance of 24,901 miles. So keep that in mind. This is how they circumnavigated the periphery of this Antarctic region. They have very interesting information further down, but I'm going to let you do your own research on that. So right over here is the flight paths that tends to happen, and you will see they are not going to cross this bottom region. This shouldn't be that big. However, you're not going to go from here to Australia through the lower portion of the earth if you were thinking about the globe. Okay, more flight paths. Okay, they will go all over the place. But they're not going to cross under. Okay, so instead of just going this way, we're cutting across here. It makes sense on a flat, actually. This is a lot easier to read on a more flat map. Okay, so this is Antarctica and the voyage, yes, but we can circumnavigate the south easily enough. It is often said by those who don't know, the British ship Challenger recently completed the circuit of the southern region, indirectly to be sure, but she was 3 years of it, traversed nearly 69,000 miles, a stretch long enough to have taken her 6 times around on the globular hypothesis. So here they talk about how another rather mysterious thing about Antarctica is the fact that many military operations were conducted in the area. Shortly after World War II, 2 military expeditions took place, the first being Operation High Jump and the second, codenamed Operation Deep Freeze. It was during the second operation that all of a sudden, and for no apparent reason, the operation was just shut down and everybody pulled out. Almost immediately afterwards, high-altitude nuclear tests was conducted at an alarming rate. So what they did find that made them immediately stop the operation, pulled out, and start with the nuclear testing. We think we know, but we will have to leave it up to you to watch some of the presentation. So we don't really know what that is. But there is an Operation Fishbowl. Okay, Fishbowl kind of allude to the fact that the Antarctic region is uncharted waters, uncharted territory. You know, when they say extraterrestrial, it does sound like it's extra, it's more land. They said that there's a possibility that they had found more land. There were more continents further inside, past the, going through the Antarctic areas, and they don't want the world to know about him. But that is one concept. So over here we can see that flights pretty much just go here. Nothing is going through there. So just here at the horn of it, it almost looked like a girl's face here wearing a dress and her bosom. And then this is her hair. So I added this because of the eclipse of the sun. The moon can block the sun, but planet Venus does not. The calculation used for the distance of the sun is based on the Earth distance to Mars. There's some kind of a, angle that they looked at in cosines to predict the distance of the Earth to the sun. And to me, it's kind of laughable because most men can't really just figure out women, leave alone trying to figure out the distance of the sun and the moon, and we're trusting that they are correct, and we never recalculated anything about it. They should actually be teaching, if they can find out the distance of the sun like that, they should be teaching everybody in high school how to get the distance of the Earth to the sun. So horizon is far. You see 200 plus miles from a commercial aircraft. So this is what we see. Okay, this is what we see. Flat. This is what you see. Relatively flat. Okay, get the waves going on and everything. So we can have waves like this, but you can be on the other end and nothing falls. Okay, so keep this in mind. And kilometers is shorter than a mile, and a mile is slightly shorter than a nautical mile. Nautical miles are longer. And it's interesting because you're not going to have engineers literally use nautical miles on land, barely over on a bridge. And sometimes they say, oh, like the building here will be slightly farther away at the top level from the building on the other side. And people have done all kinds of radar. They did like whatever they use for, navigation of measurements from the land, those assessors equipments. And the buildings over 30 kilometers would end up with the same height from the top and the bottom equal. They're completely parallel. They've done that on the sea, which is level, okay? So they're looking at the water and they can put like a little bit, they can shine like a spotlight, and they can get that very concentrated light appearing on the other end. So they did a lot of pretty cool experimentation, and over they were able to prove that the Earth is flat, meaning there was no curve where there should be on a nautical mile. So engineers are not necessarily going to make roads taking into consideration allowance for a nautical mile, because that would just make you spend more money on materials, and it will just not even be safe. So diameter matters, sun and earth, okay? It's not quite a sentence. Our sun, as close as it gets to the perfect sphere in nature, that's what they think. According to the latest calculation, its equatorial and polar diameters differ by a negligible 10 kilometers. So they say it's a perfect circle. The sun is, what's that, 1 million kilometers or 865,000 miles across, compared to the Earth's diameter, which is only 12,742, or only the diameter is only 7,918. Far less. And this is why I'm kind of like, we shouldn't be seeing a disk. We should just be like flooded with light. Okay, picture this: if the earth were an employee and the sun was the boss technically of its kind, earth would make 1,061, while the sun would be earning 116,058 each month. This is kind of like a concept that they want you to think about. Circumference: we all love flying a couple of hours and you have landed in another state or even country. If you would take a non-stop trip around the equator of the earth in a modern jetliner, it would take approximately 45 hours. So it should take us about 45 hours, which is honestly 45 hours. That's what you spend to go to some countries. You know, if you go somewhere in South Africa, even if you were to take trip from, you know, South America to Perth or whatever, sometimes it can take that long anyway. That's kind of like a non-stop nice trip. So anyhow, this is a little detail for you to think about. How long does it take to get to the moon and back? They said it's 6 days. You know, it's kind of weird to me because 6 days, 6 flights to the moon. It's just all like lunacy. And we're 66,600 miles per hour in orbit around the sun. So there's a lot of sixes. And on Apollo 13, when you see the movie, it talks about for 6 minutes they didn't hear what's going on with the astronomers, and that's kind of suspicious to me. You know why they keep having that 666 going. So anyway, I am going to end this particular topic regarding the dome, the eye planet. It's basically all we need is to read with our eyes what the Lord stated in the Word of God, because the Lord did not sacrifice his only begotten Son if he didn't love us, and he's not going to lie to us about how the world began. And so in the book of Job, Job 37:18, there was a question: have you with him spread out the sky, which is strong and as a molten looking glass? What do you think that is? Thank you and God bless.